Well, take your hymnals again. We'll get started with this session, last session. Hymn number 119. Take your books. You can stay seated. I don't know about you, but I'm still trying to get it to go down. What's in there? So we'll let you stay seated tonight, this afternoon. 119. Let's do it. Ready? Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to Thee. Take my hands and let them move at the impulse of Thy love, at the impulse of Thy love. Take my feet and let them be swift and beautiful for me. Take my voice and let me sing, always only for Thy King, always only for my King. Take my lips and let them be filled with messages for Thee. Take my silver and my gold, not a mite would I withhold, not a mite would I withhold. Take my love, my God, I pour at Thy feet its treasure store. Take myself and I will be ever only all for Thee, ever only all for Thee. 116, a few pages over. I have decided to follow Jesus. 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 No turning back, no turning back. Though no one join me, still I will follow. Though no one join me, still I will follow. Though no one join me, still I will follow. No turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. Though no one join me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back. Brother Graham, I guess you're going to be introduced again. Didn't remember, nobody remembers your name.
All right, well, it's been good. I know several had to slip out, but we're going to have the Graham sing to us once again. And if you wanted some more chicken strips like Micah, you should have already grabbed them. And man, where'd those go? Did you? Man, someone just put a shovel up to his mouth, shovel them in, man. But we're going to enjoy some more special music, and then Brother Graham's going to close out with one last session. And man, some wonderful, wonderful help today. If you haven't got help, it's because you're not listening. You're not accepting what's being told. But some wonderful help today. Appreciate the Grahams. Y'all lead us one more.
Well, preacher, how about if we do kind of our theme song? It's a little bit of a love song, but it is biblical. And we've done this at a lot of weddings over the years, but really it's kind of the testimony of our life. A friend wrote this song many years ago, and then my wife and sister wrote the repeat verse. And, if we're going to make it as a couple, we need the Lord. And so that's what this song talks about. Together in Him. I'll probably look at her instead of y'all. How's that? Walk with me, take my hand, for I need you by my side to help me stand. A house divided soon will crumble from within. We can make it. We'll stand together in Him.
I'll walk with you, take your hand, and forever by your side I'll always stand. We start our lives today, joining hearts forever. We can make it. We'll stand together in Him. Together in Him, we can climb every mountain. Together in Him, every valley can be crossed, and we can make it if we'll only trust in Jesus to guide us. So come with me and you will see we'll always be together in Him, and we can make it if we'll only trust in Jesus to guide us. So come with me and you will see we'll always be
Together in Him.
I'll walk with you.
Thank you. All right. What a joy to be here this afternoon. And preacher, I know we talked about it. I just want to get right into this final session, but question answers, or are we going to move on? Anybody have a question? Do you want to do that now or later? Because we're fine. All right, let's do it. All right. And did y'all survive the ladies' session? Those ladies that were in there? Miss Graham, she say bad things about me? I'm just kidding. I know she didn't. Well, I don't know what she said, but anyway. I will tell you this. Nobody in the room would have been more nervous than she was. And I tell you, time and time again, we've got to do several conferences. She may have told the ladies this, but a friend of mine who is a missionary in the Yukon Territory called me one day. He said, Brother Graham, I'd really like for you to come up and be with us. I said, man, I'd love to come. And Brother Larry Harrison, and I said, we'd love to come up and be with you. And he said, but I was wondering, would your wife mind to come and speak to our ladies while you're here? I said, oh, she wouldn't mind at all. We've done that before, I'm sure. And he said, we're going to have a ladies retreat. And so she may have told the ladies this, but you know, I told her, hey, Brother Harrison wants you to speak. Well, then as the thing moves forward, she finds out she's going to speak 3 times. And they're going to go to a whole separate place and be there Friday and Saturday. And I'm going to hang with the preacher. And then when she gets the program, she actually spoke 4 times. She was the keynote speaker and the only speaker. And she was like, you know, I said, this is really great. We made a trip to the Yukon Territory, somewhat of a mission field, and my wife spoke more times than I did. So anyway, I spoke 3 times, she spoke 4. But anyway, we had such a great time, so we licensed her to preach. I'm joking. Anyway, Psalm 127, if you have your Bible, Psalms 127. I didn't get to go. By the way, some of the prettiest country I've ever seen Yukon Territory. Absolutely beautiful. I'm telling you, if I could move somewhere just for the beauty of it, that would be one of my choices. It was really beautiful. Psalm 127, and I'll be there in just a second. Psalm 127. Thank you from the depths of our heart, and of course we look forward to tomorrow, being with you tomorrow. It's just a real honor for us. We have come to love and appreciate your pastor, and the more we've talked today, the more connections we have on both sides of the family. Your dad, of course, we have a lot of mutual friends and preachers that we've known through the years, many of who, do I need to put this on, by the way? Should I? Okay, all right, you can hear me? Yeah, I'll probably stick pretty close. Anyway, so many friends that we've known through the years, and some of them are in heaven now, but some just enjoyable conversation. Thank you, brother. And then, of course, I just found out where your wife was from. I may have known that, but anyway, we've got connections there, and I was thinking about that. Fond memories of places. These folks here, we had a lot of mutual friends. Our brother was talking about some of their connections. So, that's the Christian life. A little bit you start talking, you find out you've got some family in the Lord or some friends in the Lord, and so it's a blessing. And thank you for that. Psalm 127, let's begin reading in verse number 1. The Bible said, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain." Now, I used to quote this verse to my dad when I was a teenager in part. "It is vain for you to rise up early." That's where I'd stop. He'd say, "Boy, read the rest of the verse. It's vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep." What that verse is saying is, it's a sin to worry. It's ridiculous to spend all your life worrying. In other words, to get up and you're all worried about what's happening and not being able to sleep. And, he gives his beloved, we have to learn we can trust the Lord. I told the men earlier about our first baby, a little girl that was stillborn, and the overwhelming thoughts as a young man, wow, now what? And then the other thought is when you bring children into the world. I remember when our oldest son was born, I held him for the first time. And what I'm realizing is I'm holding not only my firstborn son, but a never-dying soul that's going to spend eternity somewhere. And our world was crazy then, and it is insane now. And I hear people say, "I'd never have children, bring them up in this crazy world." But I want to tell you something. Our world needs people like y'all to have children, raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Because I'm telling you, our children need to see what I saw as a young person. I'm still old enough to remember some of the great revivals. Now, we didn't see maybe what they saw in the 1800s and the Second Great Awakening or the 1700s, but I saw some great moves of God as a young man, and it's exciting. And by the way, God's still working. I'm telling you, there are places and there are times when God will just show up. Revival's still a possibility. I'm not preaching about that, but I'm saying this. It would be a very bleak mindset to think, well, there's no hope. Why should I have children? Why should I raise my children? This world's all messed up. Well, I'll tell you why, because your children might make the difference. They could be the next one to have an impact on the world for the cause of Christ. So he goes on to say, "Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of thy youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them." A buddy of mine said one time they had their fifth child, he said, "Well, my quiver's full." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Because when that fifth one was born, I started quivering." But anyway, that's not what it meant. But anyway, he said, "That hath his quiver full of them, they shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate." Every dad, if he's honest, hopes that his children do better than they. I want my children to be more successful for the Lord, even than I feel like maybe I've been allowed to be. I want my children to maybe have things that in their life for the cause of Christ. Man, it excites me. Somebody said, "Do you get jealous if one of your boys would build a larger?" Are you kidding? Man, that would be exciting. If your children, I've got sons that have preached in more countries than I have. That doesn't offend me. That excites me. As a young man, I used to dream about preaching different places, and there's nothing wrong with having a dream and a drive and a desire to want to preach, but you know, if God lets one of my sons go to places to preach the gospel that I'll never go or never be in, I'm not disappointed about that. That thrills my heart. And, you know, we want our children to make a difference. And so while we have them, you know, they're like arrows in the hands of a mighty man. You know, if you're going to build your arrows, and I'm not preaching about that, but, you know, you want the shaft straight. You want it to shoot straight. And you want to make sure that they're pointed in the right direction. And there's a lot of things you do to prepare them in your quiver so that when they get released, when they're on their own, so to speak, that, you know, they don't just run from God. I know a preacher, and I'm being critical, had 8 children just like Miss Graham and I watched their family. He was a good man. I loved to be around him. But as soon as his children would get out of high school, one by one, they left and never came back. As far as going to church or living for God, and I'm not being critical, but, you know, anybody can have a child go astray, but when you raise 8 and every one of them flies the coop and has zero interest in God, something's wrong. And I'm not slinging mud. Listen, I could have a child go wayward. You could have a child go wayward. I understand that. But folks, we ought to try to point them in the right direction. You know, I'd hate to think that every Sunday, all of our kids are grown, that every Sunday morning, Miss Graham would have to get on the phone and call them and say, y'all going to church today? Are you out of bed yet? You know, at this point, hopefully by now, you know, they're going to church not because Mom and Dad expect them to be there. They're going because they love the Lord and they want to be there. That's the goal. That's the dream. That's the desire that we have. So these verses talk about our children. I just want to mention a few things and try to wrap it up today. And thank you for your patience and your faithfulness to be here. And I do know a couple had to slip out, but hey, listen, we're glad you're here. And this is a blessing for me and my wife, and we trust for y'all. And we just love and appreciate your pastor and his family. And I know God is doing great things, but he's not done yet. Greater days are ahead. So what if Jesus comes tomorrow? Well, that'd be okay. But if he doesn't come tomorrow, let's be about our Father's business. Let's keep on keeping on till he comes. And so let's talk a little bit very quickly about the family. If I could just give you a few points and I'll be done. Number one, remember the vision for your family. You remember when you fell in love and you got married? You started making plans. I remember saying stuff to my wife when we got married. You know, we're not going to be like other couples. We'll never argue. Boy, was I wrong. Now, one fellow told my dad's preacher, he said, my wife and I have been married over 50 years and we've never argued one time. And Brother Shower said, are you serious? He said, not one single time has my wife and I ever argued. He said, we reason everything out. He said, sometimes you can hear us reasoning all over town, but we reason everything out. The truth of the matter is, you know, my dad told me a great statement in marriage counseling that I've never forgotten. Write this down. If 2 people agree on everything, one of them is not necessary. It's okay to have a diverse opinion. Not a diverse opinion about doctrine, not a diverse opinion about the truth of God's word, but you're allowed to have an opinion that can be different. If I were to ask you today, what is your favorite food? Now, I could ask like categorically, like some people say, well, my favorite is Italian, my favorite is Chinese, my favorite is American, my favorite is whatever's in front of me at the moment. But anyway, and if we ask you and you were honest and said, this is my favorite, you know, there'd be everybody in the room might have a different opinion. And by the way, you don't have to like the same thing as your favorite food to be my friend. If I were to ask you, does anybody in here have a food that you just really can't stand? I mean, even just one particular vegetable or fruit or something that just really, you just, oh, I hope I don't have, tell me. I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Is there somebody, everybody likes everything? Sour cream, you don't like sour cream? All right, can I, by vote? By vote, how many of you here like sour cream? Lift your hand. All right, I like it. Is there anybody here that, besides him, that doesn't like sour cream? Oh, I think I saw your wife raise her hand. She's out of here. Yeah, see, I'm having a vision. No, actually, I saw her step outside the door. She wanted to vote. But anyway, so, okay. So, listen, we're brothers in Christ. That doesn't affect our fellowship. I'm not going to go home today. I can't believe that guy didn't like sour cream. It's okay if you have a difference of opinion. Now, is there something else? Peas. All right. How many of you in here don't like peas? All right. There's 2. How many of you here like peas? Raise your hand. All right. Anything else? Onions. Oh, God bless you, sister. I am not an onion eater. I mean, what's that? Yeah, I can eat them cooked, but I mean, I don't look for them. You know what I'm saying? They're not my food. Now, it grieved my dad because I was the only boy. And he's like, how could I raise one son and he doesn't like onions? And I said, Dad, they're fine except for the smell, the taste, and the texture. Other than that, I love them. And my dad would say, but you like garlic. I said, yeah, but garlic tastes good. And he's like, no, you're weird. You like peppers. I said, oh, peppers are wonderful. I like green peppers. I like jalapeno peppers. Now, I'm not one of those guys that can get into those things that would, make you cry, but I like peppers. And that would just, my dad would say, what is wrong with you, son? You don't like onions. And an evangelist friend of mine got some onions from my dad one day. He said his wife had cut them up, set them on the table, and the whole family cried. And he said, no wonder the onions that your dad raised would knock your hat in the creek. But anyway, it's okay. Some of my kids like onions. I don't know where they got that, but they do. Well, I'm not going to, be mad at them for it. I wonder where they got it. They didn't get it from me. But it's okay not to like onions. It's okay to like onions. That has nothing to do with our fellowship. One more. Somebody, is there anybody else? Yes, sir. Mayonnaise. Wow. And you know what's interesting? When you see the debate over mayonnaise, over whether you like Miracle Whip or mayonnaise or this kind of mayonnaise or that kind of, you don't like mayonnaise. Yeah. Oh, wow. Miracle Whip. Okay. All right. Yeah. No, he just salvaged himself. But anyways, what's that? Sauerkraut? Oh, man. Yeah. How many like sauerkraut? I like it. Yeah. All right. Now, what about, how many of you here like Brussels sprouts? See, that's my favorite vegetable, and my kids think I'm insane. Dad, how could you like that? And, when I was a kid, I was such a picky eater. And it's hard to believe that I'd get such a physique like this, being a picky eater. But when I was a kid, I didn't hardly like anything that, like onions. I wouldn't eat Brussels sprout. There's so many things I would just avoid. And I was so weird. I didn't want any of my food touching on the plate. Anybody else here had that? When I was a man, I didn't want anything to touch. I would eat one thing at a time until I was done with that because I didn't want to mix my food. Miss Graham and I got married, and we hadn't been married very long, and she had this new recipe she was excited about that you make in a crock pot, and it's like all kinds of vegetables and chicken and some kind of soup that goes in it, and mix it all together, and you cook it in a crock pot. And she sets it on the table, and she turned around to get something. I'm looking at this hodgepodge of everything mixed up, and she turns around, and I said, Lord, you got to help me. I'm going to not only have to eat this, I got to ask you to bless it. So please, Lord, I'm newly married. I don't want to break her heart, but man, this looks gross. And so for the first time, I ate something that was a total mix of stuff. Now, I knew better than to complain when I was at home. One time I said something negative about something my mom had made. It tasted a little funny, and I said, wow, that was a little strong or something. And my dad said, you didn't like that? And I said, sir, he said, are you complaining? Your mother has labored and slaved to fix this meal, and now you're complaining about one thing? He said, I think you want some more. We put another spoonful on and said, now you eat that, and then you can be dismissed. So I learned, don't ever complain. Just avoid it. Just drive away from it and just smile. But anyway, but you got to remember the vision you have for your family. My goal in life was not to make sure that every one of my children hated onions or didn't like onions, as I don't. My dad and mom had been married for years, and somebody asked my dad, what's your least favorite food? And he said, oh, I don't know. He said, I really don't like meatloaf. And my mom said, you don't? And he said, no, not really. And she said, you realize how many times I've made meatloaf over the years? And he said, yes. You've never said anything. You've never complained about it. He said, honey, I'm not going to complain about one thing. I can eat it. He just asked me if there was anything I didn't really care for. Wow. All those years we had meatloaf because you can stretch that a ways. But anyway, so I like meatloaf, by the way. So, yeah, remember the vision for your family. And then, and I'll just say this, secondly, let me finish though. Miss Graham and I got married. We were going to be different. I used to say to her, when we get older, we're not going to do that old couple thing, or the men sit in front and the women sit in back. Baby, you're going to be right here at my side. We got married. When I got married, I owned 3 cars. Can you imagine? I had a 72 Grand Torino, and man, it was a sweet car. I mean, it had the factory built, had the vented hood and all that. Man, I love that car. But then I had a Plymouth Fury. It was a older Plymouth Fury, but my favorite car when we got married, I had a Spirit of America Nova. Chevy had decided to put that out in 74 and a half before they, to be the first to celebrate the 200th anniversary of America. Man, what a car. And it was jacked up, and I had, the wide tires and air shocks and all that stuff. That's what we honeymooned in. And it had bucket seats, and they didn't put the emphasis on seat belts in those days, so Miss Graham and I rode down the road looking like a 2-headed monster, man, she's right beside me, put a pillow there in that middle console, and man, there we are all hugged up in that Spirit of America Nova. And you know how the story goes. And she says, honey, we used to sit so close, and I'm driving. I'm like, I haven't moved. But anyway, so, I'm just kidding. Now they got those rules that you got to be, you got to be in a seatbelt. And but it's so funny, in those days, man. Years later, of course, we had 8 kids. I was looking one day for a van, and the associate pastor said, Brother Graham, you really like vans, don't you? I said, are you kidding? No, I don't like vans. I said, I like sports cars, but I got a bunch of kids, so I have to have a van. Someday I'll get back to a sports car, but anyway, not yet. But anyway, so I do have a rebuilt version of the Spirit of America Nova that the people of our church got together for 1 year for my anniversary and found an old Nova and began to work on it and recreated the Spirit of America Nova. So that was amazing what they did. But anyway, so what a surprise. But anyway, so still working on it, but it's exciting. Anyway, so we talked about it. You know what? Now we'll be with another pastor and his wife. Guess what? The ladies will sit in the back and men will sit in the front. This is what we do. I used to say, we'll never do that. Look at them old people splitting up. Man, you're going to be right here by my side. Well, the truth of the matter is, we make a lot of comments, but the real vision we have for the marriage is for our marriage to be a little bit of heaven on earth. For us to be together till death do us part. So remember the vision for your marriage, but secondly, recognize the value of your family. Your family is something we can affect for eternity. I was preaching in a conference several years ago, and the preacher that was preaching before me, and I don't think that he meant to be as unkind as he was, but for some reason he began to make fun of my wife and I for having a large family. And he made this statement, I have this new boat I just got the other day, $30,000 for this boat, and that's been several years ago. And then he was talking about some of the other things that he had and the beautiful home that he lived in. And then he looked over and he said, no, the Grahams, they'll never have anything like that. They got all these kids, and he'll never have a boat. He'll never have all the toys that I have. And, he just being, and then he made some really hard statements, almost embarrassing, and I won't even re-quote them, but my wife was in tears. And, and the host pastor, he's embarrassed because the guy went too far. And I just squeezed her hand. I said, honey, it's okay. I'm up next. And I told him, I said, you're right, brother. I probably will never have a boat like you have. Probably won't ever live in a house that's valued what yours is valued at. I may never own some of the toys that you have, but I've got 8 babies. I'm going to take all of them to heaven with me. Someday your boat will rust. Someday your cars will be gone. Someday that house will be destroyed. But what I'm doing is affecting eternity. Can I tell you something? I'm not going to compare a car or a boat or a house to the value of one child that God placed in our care. That's an eternal investment. Man, it's exciting to think about you're affecting them for eternity, and even after I'm gone, their generation can pass something on to the next generation that I want to affect my children and my children's children. And if I die before I have great-grandchildren, I want my grandchildren to pass on what Grandpa handed them. So we find to the value of our family. And of course, I've kind of dealt with this, but the companion that God gives you, the children that God places in your life, just recognize the value. And then let me say, retain the voice in your family. Retain the voice in your family. You remember the story of Lot in the Old Testament? Remember when Lot moved to Sodom and Gomorrah, and I won't dwell on it, but Lot had no voice because he lost his testimony. When the angels came to give him the message, they said, get your children and your family, get your sons and your daughters and your sons-in-laws and get them out of the city. And here's what the Bible said in verse number 14. He seemed as one that mocked. He had lived so much around the world that when he got news that God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and he went running to them, telling them, they just started laughing. What do you mean God told you? You got to be kidding. You don't know God. Well, you live just like us. I'm convinced. You remember Abraham's prayer? God, if you would spare the city for 50, for 45, for 40, all the way down till 10. Why did Abraham stop at 10? Why didn't he go all the way to 1? By the way, I would not have guessed this, but God called Lot a righteous man. You go over to Peter, and he said, that righteous man which vexed his soul. In other words, Lot knew the Lord. He just wasn't living for the Lord. I believe that if Lot had reached his own family, there would have been 10. Because he said, tell your sons, and sons in the plural means there has to be at least 2 sons. Sons-in-laws in the plural means there has to be at least 2 of them. So that's 4. And if you got at least 2 married daughters, that's 6. We know he had 2 daughters at home because he offered them to the men of the city. That's 8. And then there's Lot and Mrs. Lot. That's 10. If Lot had just reached his own family, he could have spared Sodom and Gomorrah. But instead, he chose to live like the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. And what a devastating story. So think about this. You got to keep your voice. Lot had no voice because he had no testimony. But Abraham maintained his voice. Look at Genesis 18. I'm really hurrying. Genesis 18. I don't know why, but I'm really hurrying. Genesis 18. And I want to get this and help you to see this. Lot lost his voice, but Abraham had a voice for his family. Genesis 18, this is before their son is born. And they're getting news that they're going to have Isaac. But notice what it says here in verse number 16. Verse number 17. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? He's talking about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Look at verse 19. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. God said, I know Abraham. I can trust him. He'll do what I want him to do, and he'll do what is right to do. Man, I want to be the kind of person that God said, I know Ken Graham. I'm going to give him some commandments, and I expect him to follow them. And I want to be the kind of person like Abraham that said, okay, Lord, I'll do that. I'll raise my family for you. Well, anyway, Abraham had a voice. Now, what shall I do for my children? What can I do for my children? Well, think about this and close them in prayer. I was telling one of my grandchildren last night, when we were talking, and a couple of my kids were there, and I said, as you get older, we have 8 children, 7 of them are married, so that's 8 and 7 is 15, and then I have 20. We have 20 grandchildren, so you see the crowd grows from there. And I have a great prayer responsibility. Pastor, I used to probably somewhat mistakenly think when my children get grown, my prayer life will get easier. But that is not true. My prayer life has expanded. Because, man, now I got not only 8 children and 7 of their spouses, and then, you pray for the one that's not married when the time comes that she'll find the right one. And then you pray for the grandchildren. Now we just added a granddaughter-in-law. And so and I got another grandson fixed to get married. The prayer expands. One of the things I love to do is reciting their names in prayer helps me to remember their names. I was at Dr. Don Green's home. We mentioned him, and he was a great prayer warrior. And he was 90 at the time, or maybe almost 90, and he passed away at 92. And we stopped by to make a visit, and And I called him. I said, Brother Green, I know your prayer life, and I don't want to interrupt you. He said, oh, Brother Ken, if you would come, it'd be a breath of fresh air. I'd love to fellowship with you. And I said, well, I can be there around 10:30. He said, that'd work perfect. We got there, and he said, I'm done with praying except for my missionaries, and I'll finish them after you leave. And beside his recliner was a stack of photo albums filled with missionary prayer cards. He said, these are the missionaries I'll be praying for after you leave. I'm like, whoa. So he starts talking to me about people randomly. Here's a man who's almost 90. And he says to me, hey, you know Brother John Robertson? I said, oh yeah, Brother John used to be in our church. He said, you know, I love his son, Jonathan. He's such a fine young man. He said, but, you know, he had to have his colon removed. He had that really serious disease. And he said, I pray for him. And I don't know, I just really have, he married, and he said, I pray for him and his wife. You know, her maiden name was Parker. And he's calling, you know, this young man's wife's maiden name, almost 90 years old. And then he said, you know, of course, they got a couple children now, and he's telling me the kids' names. And this is from his memory. And he said, you know, when you pray for people every day, it helps you remember their name. I'm like, I'm embarrassed because sometimes I forget names. But man, I told my grandchildren, I said, one of the things that I do is pray daily, and that, you know, helps me to keep everybody's name fresh in my mind. But oh, listen, the responsibility to pray, I can pray for them. What should I pray for my children about? Well, Job 1:5 said this, and it was so when the days of feasting was gone about, that Job sinned and sanctified, rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. Now, let me just give you a few things Miss Graham and I have prayed for our children about and do pray about. Number one, for their salvation. You can't start too soon praying for their salvation. And then pray for their schooling. Whether you homeschool or you go to Christian school or wherever your children are educated at, pray over their schooling. There's always somebody that wants to affect their mind, or if they can, infect their mind. Pray over their schooling. Pray for their spirit. Pray. You know, sometimes parents will come and they'll say, boy, I got this kid and, you know, he's just a brat and he's just got such a bad spirit. Well, first of all, pray over his spirit. Pray that God would help him. Pray that God would deliver him from being strong-willed and rebellious. Pray for their spirit. Pray for their spouse. You know, I didn't start praying for my children's spouse when they were marrying age. We prayed about that long before. I don't mean every hour of every day, but that was part of our prayer life. Lord, when the time comes, help them to find your will. And God, help us to have wisdom. And Lord, help us to veto anything that wouldn't be right. And a young lady got interested in our oldest son. I don't mind to tell you, there was a situation. They never dated, never went out. But there was a circumstance in her life. He was called to preach, and I said, listen, there's some baggage there that would probably hinder you from being a pastor. And he said, well, Dad, don't you think she deserves a second chance? I said, she does, but not with you. Because you've dedicated your life to God, and you've surrendered to preach. And I said, you allow God to work in her life. And I said, and you never know. If you'll give God time, that situation might be resolved. And I'll just tell you, she had a baby out of wedlock. And I said, that young man that fathered that baby, he's not married yet. And I said, let's pray that God might just work in their lives, that they would end up together. And that's what happened. It's a good thing he didn't step in and you say, well, she nice girl? Yeah, she loved the Lord. She made a mistake. And listen, I believe God can forgive, but it was a better circumstance for her and that young man to ultimately do the right thing and become husband and wife. And so, anyway, sometimes you got to keep your eyes open. Pray over their spouse. Pray over their steadfastness. Just ask God to help them to have consistency in their life. But not only should you enclose them in prayer, but quickly expose them to preaching. Our kids need to hear preaching. I don't get the mentality. Look, when I was a little kid, I went to church. So, Brother Graham, did you ever get tired as a little kid? I'm sure I fell asleep in the pew. Miss Graham might this afternoon. She was at a wedding last night. She's probably tired. But the truth of the matter is she needs preaching. No, I mean, we need preaching, don't we? The preaching, our kids need to hear preaching. Man, you know, my dad made meeting men of God a big deal in my life. Now, my dad wasn't a man worshiper. I'm going to tell you what, he made preaching a big deal. Listen, I loved sports when I was a kid. I played football. I played baseball. I played, some different sports. I wrestled some. But I'm going to tell you something, man. My dad made preaching paramount. And so we'd go to meetings, and my dad would say, boy, today, and by the way, it's interesting. It wasn't always, hey, you're going to hear Dr. So-and-so, this great, famous man of God. Sometimes you're going to hear this preacher today, Brother Lloyd Rodman. He pastors in a town 2.5 miles from the town that he pastors in, and the town is like, less than 500 people. And he said he's been there for years, and their church has a great missions program, and he is a great man of God. And listen, I heard him as a teenage boy, and man, I was so thrilled. And he ended up pastoring that same church for like 47 years. That church gave more to missions per capita than probably any other church in America. They were out in the middle of nowhere, and they were a giving church. It was amazing what they did for missions. And when I met him, he said, oh, Brother Ken, I've been looking forward to meeting you. I've heard about you, and I'd like to have you come preach for me. Man, I was so excited. I got to preach for Brother Lloyd Rodman. And as a 16-year-old boy, and then fast forward, I got to preach revivals for him as an adult, and then the Lord took him to heaven, and of course he had stepped down for a while, and I preached meetings for the next pastor and the next pastor, and the pastor who's there now has been there going on 30 years, 28 years, something like that, and it's just exciting to, listen, it's not just about famous people, but your kids need to hear preaching. And mom and dad, don't go home and belittle preaching. Don't go home and criticize your pastor and then wonder why your kids have an attitude about going to church. Man, lift up the man of God. Now, your pastor would be the first to tell you he's not perfect, but he's God's man. And your children need to know mom and dad are going to, if you go home, preacher says something that, hits right between the eyes, say, boy, I tell you, God really spoke to my heart today. Now, I'm going to work on this area of my life. Don't go home and say, I don't know who he thinks he is. And I know you wouldn't do that. You're here on a Saturday. But I'm just saying, the devil really likes to get in the details and ruin our children because they hear the preacher preach and dad and mom walk out and say, great sermon, preacher, and then go home and have roast preacher. Listen, we need to be careful. When I say roast preacher, I don't mean to have the preacher over for roast. I mean to go home and roast his message. But you need to hear him. You need to honor the preaching, and then you need to hone the preaching. That is, put it in practice. Incorporate. I had a man got saved in our church. It was so funny. I won't go into details. His life before he got saved was country music, and before that rock and roll, and then he worked at the post office, and his wife was a faithful, godly lady, and he started coming to church. And his wife said it was funny because he'd come home from church and say, Brother Graham said this today, and we don't do that. We probably should start doing that. And she said, my husband's trying to incorporate things that you're preaching about. He's not even saved yet. Well, it was no wonder within a few weeks he got saved. And we just had his funeral just a few months ago. He's in heaven now. And serve the Lord. Man, you talk about a blessing. But you know what he was saying is, wow, preacher showed us this from the Bible. Let's make this part of our life. And she said, here's my husband trying to, let's do what the preacher said. And it's no wonder God tendered his heart to get saved. So then let me say this, encourage their potential. Your children have potential for God. Paul said in Romans 1:11, for I long to see you that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift to the end you may be established. Listen, mom and dad, encourage your children's potential. If they have some talent to sing, encourage them to sing for the Lord. If they're trying to learn instruments, you know this. You've watched little children get up in church and their first song, they play one finger, B, 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 and they may hit a wrong note. Don't go, man, that's terrible. You're a lousy piano. Don't ever do that to a child. I'll tell you what, they had more courage than many of us would. And the thing about it is, the only way they can learn is for somebody to teach them. And my little sister learned to play the piano when she was just a little girl. She drove me nuts. I'm telling you, we lived right next door to the church. There was a piano in the back part of the church. She'd go in there every day and pound and play and pound and play. And I mean, it was annoying. You didn't want to be in there because, the noise that came from that piano was awful. But little by little, she started learning to play, started learning to chord. And man, I'm telling you, she's a gifted pianist today. And she plays, now reads music, but she also plays by ear. Can I tell you something? I'm glad mom and dad encouraged her. Hey, keep trying, keep playing, keep on working at that. God's going to help you to get that. I'm just telling you, mom and dad, you need to encourage your children. If they've got a heart for God, they want to do something. My youngest daughter rode with me for a little bit. We were traveling to the wedding, and so she followed us, and then she switched places, talked her mom into driving. I need to talk to dad. Anyway, I'm tired, Mom, you drive. But anyway, so she got in the truck with me, and we talked a little bit. My youngest daughter is an amazing writer. She can write. Her creativity, just amazes me. And she's like, Dad, I just don't know where to start, exactly what to do. And she'll write things, and I'll think, wow, I wish I'd have thought of that. You want to write my outlines? But anyway, she's a very gifted writer. She's talking to me about it. I didn't go, well, you know what? I don't think you've got what it takes. No, I'm going to encourage. I'm going to fan the flame. You can write something that God could use. Listen, I'm for it. You want to do something that'll impact others for Christ, I want to encourage you. So encourage their potential, and then quickly eliminate the problems. In your children's life, if there's inappropriate relationships, put a stop to it. I'm just going to hit the highlights here. Be careful who their companions are. Proverbs 13:20, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Mom and Dad, you ought to be able to decide who they're going to run with. I've had parents say to me, well, I don't want to pick my children's friends. Well, I'm going to tell you what, you better have veto power. Because there's some people you shouldn't let your kids hang with. And the old statement, birds of a feather flock together. And if you're a rebel as a child, listen, I'll be friendly to you, but I don't want my kids running with you if you're going to pull them into the world. I want them to be friendly to you. But I want to encourage them to run with people that want to walk with the Lord. Let me just say this, by the way. Two good young people left alone can get in trouble. So if two good people left alone can get in trouble, what's going to happen if there's a strong rebel leading the pack? And, that doesn't mean that they can't take the right stand. But Mom and Dad, be careful who you let your kids run with. There may be people who are trying to undermine what you're trying to build up in their life. So guard against inappropriate relationships. Watch who it is that counsels them. Wise counsel is a blessing, but be careful. And then let me quickly wrap this up. Enjoy the posterity with your children. 128 of Psalm says this, blessed is everyone that feareth the Lord, that walketh in his ways, for thou shalt eat the labor of thine hands. Happy shalt thou be, and it shall be well with thee. Thy wife shall be as a fruitful vine by thy sides of thy house, thy children like olive plants round about the table. It's interesting to think about this. Behold, thus shalt the Lord, thus shalt the man be blessed that feareth the Lord. But here's the thing I want you to see. He said they'll be like olive plants. I've been to Israel many times. They have a lot of olive trees there. And olive trees, man, they live for decades. I mean, it's unreal. There are olive trees right now in the Garden of Gethsemane that are estimated to be at least 2,300 years old. That means that there are olive trees there right now that were there when Christ prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's amazing to me. And they're old. You talking about gnarly looking, man. Their wood gets so twisted and everything. And what's funny is you'll see them, and then there'll be new shoots coming out. They're just an amazing tree. But can I tell you something about olive trees? The most crucial time of an olive tree's life is the first 4 to 5 years of its life. And when you plant an olive tree, and you go over, I've seen plants rows and rows of olive trees planted. They will do everything they can, like you do with tomato vines. They'll stake them, they'll wrap things around them, they'll do everything they can to prop them up to make sure they get rooted in those first 4 to 5 years. And once they get through that, listen, friend, they're going to stand strong. They're going to make it. And can I tell you something? The most crucial time for our children are those early years in their life. Don't think, well, when they get older, I'm going to try to help them. Get on it while they're young and stay after it. Man, I'll tell you, it's worth it. It really is. Sometimes it seems like it's overwhelming, but enjoy the posterity of your children. Labor together, laugh together, and learn together. You can have a wonderful time as a family. Man, I'm telling you, labor together, laugh together, and learn together. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we love you. We thank you for this time today and just the opportunity to just meet with your people and the great sweet spirit that we felt. Bless now our time together. Bless the services tomorrow in Jesus' name. Let's bow our heads just for a moment if we could. And I'm going to ask Miss Graham, if you don't mind, just slip to the piano. And I don't know, maybe God dealt with you about something, and you can pray right there at your seat. You don't necessarily have to come forward. Maybe you and your wife want to pray together. Maybe you and your children. If God gave you something that he's touched your heart about, I just want to give you an opportunity right now in the quiet of this moment. Just let the Lord have his way. And just do business with God. Whether they're at your seat, whether here in the altar, it's fine. Let's do business with the Lord. Let him have his ways. He's working in your heart. You just mind the Lord. more verse. While folks are praying, let's just mind the Lord. We'll turn it to the pastor. Thank you for your faithfulness, your attentiveness. This has been a joy for us. I hope it's been a blessing and a help, and certainly look forward to a great day tomorrow preaching.
Amen. Well, it has been good to be here today. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I hope you got something today, and we're going to go ahead and be dismissed. Make sure you're here tomorrow. Normal services. Normal service in the morning and then an afternoon. And Brother Graham will be with us again tomorrow. And praise the Lord, has some more special music. Can't go wrong with special music. I love it. And if anyone else wants to ever jump in and sing, I'd be all right with that, okay? But been such a blessing to be here today. If everyone would participate, all you men at least, we need to break down these tables and get the chairs set back up how they're supposed to go. So if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes, all the tables are just going to go straight in the closet there, and the chairs are in the other room, and we've got the dollies in there. And so if you guys don't mind sticking around and helping just so we can get that back together for tomorrow, that'd be a huge blessing. And once again, I just, man, it's been such a blessing. If you got a blessing today, you say amen with me, all right? And make sure you get over here and either today or tomorrow, and you thank them for coming, because man, what a blessing. And I want to remind you, we're taking up a special offering tomorrow. Anything that comes in the plate that's not designated, unless it is designated to them, is going to go to them on top of what we already do for what we're going to do for them. But man, I tell you what, I've been blessed. I know my wife's got help. I've got help, and that's something, man, it's priceless help. And we've got help from the Word of God and help from man. They've done this a few times, you know. Had a few kids, raised a family, and been married a little bit longer than me. You know, not too much, but just a little bit. But man, what a wonderful help. So we'll go ahead. We'll be dismissed, and if y'all want to help, then we'll just get this broke down and put back for the church tomorrow. And hymnals that are out here, if you want to just stack them up here, and we've got the rest in the bookstore, and we'll put those together, all right?